Well, good evening, everyone. I can't tell you how much I wish that you were all here instead of there. It's kind of lonely in here. These past 6 weeks, of course, have been unprecedented for our country, for our world, certainly for Dungeness Community Church. Life at one level has been pretty quiet. At another, I would have to say this has been some of the busiest and most challenging days that we as a staff have faced. I explained to someone recently that for our church staff, I think the feeling has been that we were trying to build a hot rod and drive it at 100 miles an hour at the same time. And while the days have been long, and at times, I think we all have felt lonely. I know all of us have been feeling that loneliness. I am really grateful that they have not been faced alone. So many of you have contributed in so many ways, and I just want to begin tonight by thanking some people who have made significant contributions and have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to help all of us stay together. First, I want to give a big thank you to Dale Arvison and Pastor Sean, who have been working with me to do a lot of the video recording and editing that has been going on. There have been hours of recording and editing that has had to happen over these past weeks. Our Sunday services, because of that, are now online, as well as being on Wave Cable Channel 21. In fact, speaking of Wave Cable, I want to give a little shout out to Eric Phillips, who is with Port Angeles Public Access TV. It was Eric that actually reached out to us and invited us to put our services online and on TV. And that has really been good because we have a number of folks within our church that don't have good internet access, and that has given them a way to view our services. And it also has allowed us to reach out to a number of people outside of our church family. So I really appreciate Eric making that available to us. Of course, we have our Dcc Daily Program that has been online since this all started, Monday through Friday. I host that little 15-minute program in the mornings. And that one, too, is something I need to thank a person behind the scenes, Jennifer Freimeyer, because Jennifer has come alongside to help line up the interviews that happen there. In fact, she's going to start doing some of the interviews for me. And I really appreciate the help that she's given in helping that program keep going. On top of those programs, there have been several special projects, including the communion service that was led this last Sunday by Pastor Wayne, this evening's talk, and some other events that none of those events, the videotaping for those, would have been possible without the help that Dale and Sean have been giving. Second, I'd like to give a big thank you to the ladies that are normally in our front office. Colleen Price, our office administrator, Jane Boltadob, and Jennifer Freimeyer. Although they have been forced to operate from home, they have continued to do just an amazing job at keeping all the plates spinning for us. One job in particular that I want to commend them for, and I want you to be aware of, is the work they did in updating our entire church database. That is one of those jobs that you don't do unless you are forced to by, let's say a pandemic or something, because it is tedious and it is difficult. When this all started, we realized very quickly that we actually weren't sure exactly who all we needed to be connecting with locally, and especially who might be falling through the cracks. Who was not getting the emails that we were sending out, who was not able to view services online. And because of the restrictions, we couldn't rely any longer on just seeing people at church on a Sunday morning. So that meant we needed to go through that database with a fine-tooth comb, figure out who was still an active part of DCC and who may have moved on or moved out of the area. We started looking at our database with over 1,300 contacts. Every entry was reviewed, and then we tried to pare that down from people that we knew were no longer here. And then an email survey was sent out. It went out and we received about 300 responses back. That helped us refine the list some more. but there were a lot of surveys that didn't come back to us. And so we had to start making phone calls. Those ladies and a small group of volunteers started making 600 phone calls. And some of those required more than one call to connect with people. By the time they were all done, we had been able to define that there are approximately 540 households, families, couples, individuals, that consider DCC to be their home church and who live here locally. There are a number of friends who live out of the area that like to stay in touch, but as far as the people that are right here in the Sequim, Port Angeles area, there are 540 households. We also were able to define about 25 households that didn't have email access. And we were able to assign our elders to be in touch with those people to be sure that someone is connecting and reaching out to them and that they're being cared for. Finally, coming out of that, there was a church-wide mailer, good old U.S. Postal Service, snail mail, that went out to all of the households that were local. And you probably have received that mailer. The purpose was to be sure that everyone knew what resources were available for us online. So whenever you get a chance, and you see Colleen or Jane or Jennifer, would you please extend a big thank you to them for all the work that they have put in making this happen. Another behind-the-scenes player that you may or may not know is Mike Prichard with Prichard Design. Mike is the guy that actually has designed our website and maintains it for us. Good Christian brother, and he has done a terrific job of helping us to rapidly adapt and upgrade our website at dcchurch.org. One of the important enhancements that we've added to the website is what we call the switchboard. If you go to our website, you'll see that switchboard banner at the top. And that actually came about because of an idea that Steve Vieira sent to us. And he pointed out that we had a lot of online resources, but it was scattered as to how you got to things. And so the idea of the switchboard was to bring all those things together in one place for easy access. And Mike took that idea and helped us develop it into a reality. And so now there is this one-stop destination where you can find our online video programs. You can get into DC Connect, our online database. You can find the church Facebook page. You can get to Right Now Media. You can do online giving. There are conference calling tools there, as well as a link for our weekly prayer call that happens on Thursday nights. You can even find a link there to download the app for your smartphone. Something new that has just been added there is what we call a community resource page. We know that for some of you, there is real hardship going on right now. You've had work hours cut back, you have had your business closed, and you're needing help. And there is help within the church, our benevolence team, our helping hands team, but we realize some of the needs may go beyond what we can do in-house. And so we have tried on that page to pull together as many resources as we can find, both within the church and within the community, that may be of help to you. Gary and Nancy Stack did a webinar a couple weeks ago talking about dealing with depression and anxiety. There's a link for that talk available there. The Stacks are also available for one-on-one counseling if that would be helpful to you. So I hope you'll check out that resource page, and that if you have needs, you'll find something there to help. And if you're aware of resources that we have not found yet that should be on that page, please let us know. We would like to keep improving that and making it a really valuable tool for our church family. Speaking of giving assistance, I want to thank all of you who have given faithfully through this time. There are a lot of churches and a lot of parachurch ministries that have been forced to make very difficult decisions because they have seen a steep decline in their giving. Not surprisingly, because many of their supporters are going through real financial hardship themselves. Ministries are not alone in that. Businesses and families everywhere are facing difficult times and making difficult decisions. I just have to say that so far, thanks to your generosity, our needs are being met. Many of you, I know, have bravely tried giving online for the first time, and I think you found that it was easy. And I thank you for doing that. Others of you have been mailing checks in, which is great. However you've given, thank you. It has allowed the ministries here to go on without interruption. One area where people have given specifically is to our Benevolence Fund. Our Benevolence Fund is a pool of money that is specifically to help people within our church family or people within our community that our church family knows to provide financial assistance for them. And we've had a number of people who have given to that and indicated that they would like to help. Frankly, so far, we have not had many requests. I am sure that there are needs out there. We just have not been hearing about it. If that's you, if you are facing some hardships, some needs right now, I know that asking is hard. But in times like this, when jobs have been curtailed and businesses closed, there is no shame in saying, I need a hand. If you know someone in our church family, or a friend or a neighbor of yours in the community that needs help, please let us know. All you need to do is call the church office or text the office. The phone number and the text number are the same, 683-7333, or drop us an email and just let us know that you're aware of a need. You don't even have to say if it's your need or someone else's need. Just let us know there's a need, and we'll have someone get in touch with you to talk about the details. I also want to acknowledge some folks who have continued to keep our campus in good shape. If you've driven by the church or if you came to Pastor Wayne's drive-by reception on Sunday afternoon, you saw that everything looks really good around here. The lawns are mowed, the flowers are bright, there's a beautiful new sign out front, the striping in the parking lot has got a fresh coat of paint, and if you look close, you'll even see that there are new windows that have been installed in the chapel. Even though we can't use our facility much right now, there are some hardworking and faithful people who are keeping things in good shape for us. Thanks to Terry Sage, our custodian. Terry is just faithful, he is hardworking, and he keeps this place looking great. Also James Barbaras, who oversees our building and grounds. And Willis and Greta Beitzel, who have done a stellar job installing the new and much needed weather-tight windows in the chapel. And of course, Forrest Miller, who continues to oversee our DC Campus 2.0 project. By the way, DC Campus 2.0, you may be wondering what's going on there. It is still in progress, but we have shifted into slow mode. The things that we're allowing to go forward right now would be drawings, some engineering work, any permits that we need to apply for. Those things are moving forward. We're also moving forward on putting the kitchen back together. Most, if not all, of the materials needed for the kitchen have already been purchased, and we're waiting for the flooring to be installed. We're allowing that to move forward. Other aspects are being put on hold for right now as we just wait to see how things unfold in the weeks ahead. One more group that I want to give a shout out to are all of you who have found ways to serve in our community. Many of you have found ways to serve and help that we're not even aware of. But there are some things that we are aware of. We know that there is a team of ladies that have made hundreds of masks that have been given to medical workers, first responders, and made available to families within our church. And I just thank you for all the work you have put in making those masks and also making gowns. Also, there is a new soup kitchen that has been started by some of the staff at Helen Haller to feed families that have need, and a number of you have gotten involved in that soup kitchen. I think this week was the first week that some of our people were showing up to help make soup, and thank you so much for doing that. There are a lot of you that have taken on a personal ministry of making phone calls or sending cards to each other, and that just means so much. And I want to encourage you to keep on doing that, those small practical ways of letting someone know that you care and you're there. Also, I want to say thank you for all of you who have sent notes and emails of encouragement to us as staff and left voicemails for us. It is very much appreciated, and so thank you for doing that. Okay, how soon can we get back to normal? I'm ready now, and I imagine a lot of you are as well. But getting back to normal is going to happen slowly. It's going to build in phases, and it will probably cycle back and forth. Someone said that we should think of the process more as turning up the dial rather than just flipping the switch. There is much that we still don't know about how and when that dial is going to turn up, but some things are getting clearer. Last week, President Trump released a guideline document titled Opening Up America Again. You can find it online. I would encourage you to read it for yourself. It is fairly brief, but it does outline for us the phases that are being recommended to move through. It sets out a 4-phase plan. The plan is based on evaluating three key criteria. I'm going to walk you through it, but be aware that this is not anything that is set in stone. The plan is just a guideline, and it lacks a lot of specifics. Some specifics that I'm going to mention are actually drawn from past actions of the Centers for Disease Control. Trying to guess how this plan will be implemented, people have looked back at the history of what's happened before and have tried to extrapolate from that what may happen going forward. How and when this gets implemented in our state is going to be at the direction of the governor's office. So although we have these federal guidelines, which are quite generic, how and when they get applied here will be up to our own state's government. As of the day that I'm recording this, this is actually Thursday afternoon right now, the word is that the stay-home order is going to be extended, although there has not been a firm date established for that yet. By the time you hear this program, we will probably know more specifics. What that means is that the federal guidelines will not be implemented, most likely, until the stay-home order begins to be lifted in our state. So we don't really know when we get to enter into these 4 phases. Let me talk you through them. Level 1 is a level that has to be attained for 2 weeks. As I just pointed out, we don't know when it will be initiated, but once it's initiated, here are the standards that would have to be met. There would need to be a declining flu and COVID symptom reports. So the number of cases that report symptoms that look like COVID or that look like just regular flu, we would need to see those things declining. There would also need to be declining confirmed cases of COVID. And that's based on the percent of cases confirmed versus total cases tested in the same period. The reason I make that point is, as we start testing more broadly, you may actually see the number of cases increase. But if the number of confirmed cases is a smaller percentage, a decreasing percentage of the total testing, that would still meet the criteria. So even though you may see the number go up, if the percentage is going down, we're meeting that criteria. And the third is that hospitals would not be operating in a crisis mode. They would be operating at a normal capacity. If we meet those criteria for 2 weeks, then we may be allowed to meet in small groups up to 10 people. The word may is important. All of this is contingent on how our state government interprets and applies these guidelines. What that means is that effectively, the first way we're going to be able to regather will be in home groups. It will not be a large group, it will be in small home groups. The second level would be attained when we pass an additional 2 weeks And during those 2 weeks, we meet the same criteria. The reported symptoms continue to go down. The percentage of confirmed cases continues to go down. And hospitals continue to work at a normal level. If we meet that criteria, we may be allowed to meet in groups of up to 50. That could allow for small groups to gather here at the church. Sean, maybe we can show folks the wide angle here again, just so they can see this. I've got the chairs set up so that they're all 6 feet apart. The way it's configured right now, we can accommodate about 40 people in here. Now, if you put couples together, family groups together, I think we could get upwards of maybe 80 people in here. At phase 2, that doesn't really matter because 50 would be the maximum, but that's what I'm talking about when we talk about small groups. We also have closed circuit TV that is already hooked up to the chapel, and so we might be able to put another group over there that would be larger than a home fellowship group, but it would not be a full-size congregation like we're used to on a Sunday morning. In order for those groups to meet, a group of 50, the federal guidelines state that some steps have to be taken. There needs to be screening to be sure that people that are ill are not coming. There needs to be social distancing, and there needs to be the use of personal protective equipment. Also, after each meeting, there has to be sanitizing of the facility, which has implications if we did have groups meeting here on, say, a Sunday morning, and we wanted to do several small groups, they couldn't come in one right after the other. There would have to be a sanitizing period in between groups coming in. That's level 2. Level 3 means that for an additional 2 weeks, we would continue to meet the same criteria, those downward trends. And if we stayed on track with that, then larger groups would be allowed to gather, but not groups with vulnerable people. Those who have health conditions that make them vulnerable would still be required to stay away from large group settings. What we don't know is what larger groups means. Does that mean 100, 250? That has not been defined. It requires, those larger groups still require the same steps be taken for screening, maintaining social distance, the use of PPE, and sanitizing after each meeting, although they may be less stringent in some of those requirements. We have to wait and see. The final level is where things get back to something that looks like normal. We don't fully know what normal is right now, but it's where we could anticipate large groups being allowed to gather and maybe some of the restrictions being relaxed enough to where it feels more like what we're used to. In order to reach that level, we have to maintain what was achieved in level 3. We have to maintain that for 6 weeks. Now, the catch is, everyone says we should expect setbacks. If everything went really smooth, and if we could start tomorrow walking our way through these gates, and we can't, but if we could, it would still take 3 months from beginning to end to get through it, which means we couldn't expect a large group meeting any earlier than August. But we should anticipate, especially as we move into fall, we move into winter, that there may be a resurgence. And if that happens at any point in the process, things could start to roll back the other way. And if they do, then we would have to go through the process all over again. The words that I keep running into as I have been reading and listening to a lot of people about this stuff are phrases like this. Things are uncertain. The situation is volatile. You need to make contingency plans. You should expect cycles. We're on a roller coaster. And so the key as we move forward, and I encourage you to keep this uppermost in your mind, is we have to be flexible. Let me just talk for a moment about unity and submission as we go through this process. We are a diverse group. That is both the beauty and one of the challenges of the body of Christ. In the early days of the church, you find that one of the miracles was that it brought together people that normally would not have associated with each other, and certainly not in a loving fellowship. There were Jews, there were Gentiles, there were Roman soldiers, and there were people whose lands had been taken captive by Rome, all fellowshipping together as one body. The rich and the poor, brothers and sisters together in Christ, people who had been redeemed by Jesus' blood, filled with his Holy Spirit, and called into a new community. We are still a body that has been called from many backgrounds, and we've been called into a new community and called to a higher love. So what does that have to do with COVID-19? Well, as we move forward, and as we start strategizing about how we're going to regather, you're going to discover that not everyone envisions it the same as you. Some of you have concluded that this is all ridiculous and we should just throw the doors open and do what we want. Others are deeply concerned and fear that perhaps our leaders haven't taken a strong enough stand and haven't taken severe enough measures to stop this disease. I want you to be mindful that there are those who are your brothers and sisters in this congregation who may view this pandemic differently than you. And I would pray that we would never let secondary things like stay-at-home orders or political calculations interfere with our highest calling, which is the call to love. I don't say this because I have detected a problem. I figure it's easier to talk about it before it happens. The fact is that many on both sides of the issue have the same goal, and that is to do what seems to be the most loving. Some of us are deeply concerned about the financial and the emotional toll that this shutdown is taking, and we want to see things opened up as quickly as possible to relieve that suffering. Others of us are also deeply concerned for the physical health and the safety of others, and we don't want to open up too soon. Let me share with you a verse from Romans chapter 12. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality. Love one another with brotherly love. Outdo one another in showing honor. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality. That seems like a pretty good guide to take with us as we walk through the days ahead. As to political tensions, I want to remind you that the church is not being singled out for persecution in this. I've heard a few comments here and there, not within our church particularly, but I've seen and heard some stuff online where people have suggested that perhaps churches are being targeted in this, that our rights are being taken away. And to be sure, there are rights that have been taken away, and there is a valid debate about when and how those rights should be restored. As a church, we're facing the same kind of regulations that the NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, and a host of other venues are facing. And so the church is not being singled out. We rather are facing something as an entire society that is affecting every strata of it. So how should we respond to those in authority? Well, I believe that we have a duty as followers of Jesus to act with respect to the governing authorities in every way we can that does not cause us to defile God's rule. Romans chapter 13, verse 1 says this: "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. You need to remember that when Paul wrote those words about government being instituted by God, the government he was talking about was the government of Rome, which was no friend to the church. And yet Paul recognized that government, while it can have its abuses, has a God-given role to protect society. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 41, Jesus is speaking. And he says, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. He was referring to a practice where a Roman soldier could demand that someone carry his baggage for him for 1 mile. And of course, it was deeply resented by the people that a government figure could impose this on them. Not only did it mean you had to go 1 mile out of your way, it really meant 2 miles out of your way because you had to walk back to where you started. And Jesus, confronting that which seemed unjust, said, well, if they ask you to go 1 mile, go double that distance. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2 says that, first of all, I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. Pray for those who are in authority. They face incredibly difficult decisions. I've faced some difficult decisions just trying to decide how to lead a fairly small group of people. I can't imagine the difficulty and the tension and the high stakes that our state and federal leaders are facing. Pray for them, that they will have wisdom to lead us well. So what's the plan? How do we create a structure that is strong and flexible given all the unknowns that lie before us? Well, let me show you where we were and what happened. So here's where we were. We were one big happy lump. And then somebody hit the spin cycle. And what happened was scattered chaos. We went everywhere. Some people had good connections, some had weak connections, and some had no connections at all. On a regular Sunday morning, most people know where they're going to sit, and you know who you're going to see. The pandemic was like walking in here on a Sunday morning and finding all the chairs are gone and everyone you know has left. A lot of us realized that we were missing more on a Sunday morning than just hearing live music or hearing a preacher talk up close and personal. What we were missing is we were missing the people in our pew. We were missing those moments of fellowship and conversation and encouragement. So the question is, how do we find our seats again? How do we get consistently connected with a group of friends? Even if it's by phone, that we know will be there. You remember back in the days before we had email? And if you wanted to get hold of a lot of people, you could set up a phone tree. Now, for those of you that maybe are too young to remember what a rotary telephone is, let me tell you how a phone tree works. One person, maybe at the church office, would call 5 or 6 designated people. And those people all had 5 or 6 people that they would call. And they would call another set of people. And in that way, by making just a few phone calls, suddenly you could spread information very quickly to the whole group. Well, I'm thinking that we need to come up with something like that. Imagine if we had a network of liaisons, people that were connecting directly with church leadership, and they in turn could act as a hub to communicate regularly with a small group of friends. And that communication could be anything ranging from a Zoom video conference to a phone call. Now, with those connections made, and when the time comes that small groups can get together, there's a natural place to go. You already know who you could get together with. You already know who's sitting in your pew. And that means if you already know that, then it's a pretty simple thing to get together and sit on their couch, even if you can't yet come back to the church building. And then, when things open up a little more, those little groups can easily merge into bigger groups. What would that look like here at the church? Well, even with social distancing, we could arrange for those larger groups to meet in both the auditorium and the chapel. As I mentioned, we have closed-circuit TV, and so both groups could participate in the same service and watching it. We could set up multiple meetings that would accommodate more people and accommodate the needed safety measures. And as the social distancing restrictions were relaxed, those groups could easily grow into bigger groups until the day comes that we are back to something that feels and looks more normal. Here's the great thing about organizing ourselves this way. If the restrictions cycle backwards, you don't lose your seat. Even if we have to shelter in place again, it won't be chaos. We will still be meaningfully connected. You still will know who is sitting in your pew. And a structure like this accommodates variety. Even when we are allowed to meet together as a large group, there are going to be some small groups that won't be ready to join with that big group yet. They will have their own set of concerns, maybe health concerns, that they feel it's better for them to stay in a small group. There are going to be other people that because of their health concerns, they're going to need to continue to stay at home on their own. But everyone will still be connected. The hubs will still be there. The structure will still be in place, whether you're in the big group, a small group, or you're staying at home. Now, the challenge is, how do we get ourselves organized? And to help us with that, there is a survey that is going out. In fact, as you're watching this program, that survey should be arriving in your email box. And I would like to ask you to go and find that survey. In fact, why don't you go find it right now? You can click pause on this video. I will still be here. I won't be offended. Click pause, check your email, and find that survey. The from line, if you're looking at the address, it's going to be from DC Church at ccbchurch.com. And the subject will say, the Moving Forward Survey. Open up that email, click the link there, and you'll need to answer 10 questions. This survey is going to be foundational as we start making plans for how we move forward. And so I would ask you to take care of that tonight. Find it, fill it out, hit return, send it back to us. If you can't find it in your email, maybe check your spam folder. It may have gotten sent there. And if you can't find it there, then give the office a call or send us a text or send us an email, let us know, and we will get it to you. So how are we going to step through these phases? Well, one thing has become clear to me, and that is that online services are going to continue to be a significant part of what we do. But as we try to perfect this and make it more meaningful, you're going to see us experimenting, trying to find the right approach, trying to find some creative approaches. One thing I can tell you right up front, as we experiment and as we try out new things, something is bound to fall flat. When that happens, we just ask for your patience and understand that we are all in this together trying to figure it out. Right now, what we're going to do, and the phase 1 things we're going to do, is something that Pastor Sean is working on to develop those plans. The right now means that we find ways to connect online and by phone. Some of you have already learned some new skills that you didn't even know about a few weeks ago. You have learned what Zoom is and how to connect. Others of you are holding off. And one of the reasons you've held off is because you keep thinking, I'll just wait till this is over. It should just be a couple more weeks now. You know, I spent a few years living in snow country. I lived in Canada for a little bit. And around here, when it snows, I can sometimes just wait it out. Why bother with digging my truck out if I just need to wait a day and it'll go away? But when you live in snow country, if your vehicle gets snowed in, you recognize pretty quickly that if you don't go and do a little work, you're going to have a very long, dark, cold, lonely winter because the snow is not going away anytime soon. I'd like to suggest to you that we are in a bit of a winter here as far as getting back together. And if you've been holding off learning some of those skills, like how to get on a conference call, how to use a tool like Zoom, I think you should take the time to learn that skill. Go ahead and dig it out, figure it out. I know it will seem a little awkward to begin with, but the more you work with it, the more natural it becomes. I'm involved in a pastor's prayer call once a week, local pastors in the area. And we do that on a conference call. And I'll have to tell you, the first few times we did it, it was awkward. This morning I was on that call, and it was just being in a prayer meeting. It felt very natural. People knew what to do, and you'll get there as well. So let me encourage you to learn some of those skills to make the most of it. Speaking of other new things, we are looking at some creative ways that small groups could watch a church service together even when they can't be together. And they could do that at a time of their choosing. There are some technologies out there that if your group couldn't get together on a Sunday morning, but you wanted to watch the YouTube video of the service together, it would allow you to pick a different time, watch it together, and it actually has tools built in that allow you to communicate as you're watching the service. I guess it's the modern equivalent of passing notes in church. In this case, we encourage that kind of behavior. That's good. Be talking to each other and processing what you're hearing, what you're seeing. Prepping for phase 1 of regathering means then we move on to the next step, which is coordinating small groups gathering in homes. And that's where that survey tool is so important. Some of you already have those connections. You're in a life group, and that's a natural place for you to get together. Or you already know a group of friends, your church friends, that you guys would naturally get together and do church together as soon as you can. That's great. Could I say that that's also a wonderful way to invite a friend who isn't a part of our church family to join you? I think we're going to see people that might never have accepted an invitation to come to church formally that are going to jump at the chance to get together with you and a few of your friends and have a meal together maybe, watch the service together, and open up some wonderful conversations about faith. Some of you don't have a place to go to, but you would like to join others, or you might be willing to host a group at your home. You've got a large living room, you have a big TV, whatever the case, you could host a group. By filling out that survey, you're going to give us some of that information. What would this group look like? What would you do when you got together with the folks in your pew in a small group? Well, I think you'd probably grab a cup of coffee or cup of tea or whatever you like. You would sit down and watch the service together. You might sing together when they're singing. You would listen to the sermon, and then when it's over, you'd talk about it. Maybe you'd have some light refreshments. Maybe you'd have a meal. The meal doesn't have to be extravagant. Burnett and I have a life group that we decided to do dinner together every week, back when we could meet together, but we wanted it to stay simple. So we said, we're just going to do soup and bread every week. That way people aren't stressing about, how do I make a big fancy meal? We just trade around. Someone makes a pot of soup, we get a loaf of bread, because it's not about the food, it's about the fellowship. And so maybe your group does that. You have a light meal together, and you just enjoy some time together, and you let God lead in opening up those conversations about spiritual things. And like I said before, since the services are pre-recorded, Your virtual pew, your small group doesn't even have to meet on Sunday mornings. You can pick the time that's best for you. Phase 2 and beyond, when we can start getting bigger groups together, how is that going to work? There still are a lot of unanswered questions, but Pastor Britt is leading a task force that is working to develop those plans. We know that that is still weeks down the road, but they're beginning now to put the work in to decide how will we do it when the time comes. We already know that there's going to be some oddness, for sure, as we start to get together. If we're required to wear masks, what an odd way to come to church. We don't know that would be required, but it might be. But we're going to be working hard to figure out how to implement good safety practices and how to do it in the least odd way possible. You can pray for that group as they work through those many questions. Is it going to be like this forever? I read a quote that was attributed to a country preacher who said, "This may pass like a kidney stone, but it will pass." The day will come when we're all together again. There may be changes in how that looks, but the day will come. And we will again experience the encouragement and the joy of being in a large group. But I've come to think of this process, the process of getting there, more as a dance class than a kidney stone. And trust me, I speak from personal experience on both fronts. Kidney stones are incredibly painful, and to the best of my understanding, completely pointless. And once they're passed, life goes on like nothing ever happened. Dance class is different. I'm no dancer, but a few years ago, our kids blessed Burnett and I with the gift of some dance lessons. Now, my wife was ecstatic. She loves dance, and she is pretty, she's graceful, and she loves it. None of those things are true of me. Dancing for me is hard work, it's awkward, and sometimes it's even a little painful. But if you stick with it, good things start to happen. You learn new steps, you learn some rhythms, and eventually you move beyond just counting steps and you begin to enjoy something new. You begin to enjoy the beauty of the dance. In all honesty, I did not stick with the dance class long enough to get there. I definitely needed a lot more time. But this pandemic is teaching all of us some new steps. It feels awkward, maybe even painful. Unlike my dance class, it's not going away anytime soon. And maybe that's a good thing, because it's going to force us to learn some new moves. Actually, the more I've thought about this, the more I see exciting things ahead for us. My mind has gone back to the account of the early church in Acts chapter 2. We find this in verses 42 through 47. We're told that those early believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. They were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. You see the blend there? Yeah, there was the big group, but a lot of what was happening, and a lot of where fruit was occurring, people were being added into the family of God, was happening in those small home groups as they just had a meal together, as they shared life together, as they cared for each other in difficult times, even financially caring for each other. Do you realize the opportunities that we have right now? I have been listening to a variety of talks with pastors around the country, and there is an explosion of people who are tuning in to church that have never tuned in before. Now, for ourselves, our Sunday services on a regular Sunday would have maybe 500 people that would show up here. But right now, online, we're getting 400 to 600 views. Every one of those views represents probably 1.5 to 2 people. So we're seeing 600 to 900 people impacted on a Sunday morning. And that doesn't count the people that are watching on Wave Cable 21. We have no way to track that metric. However, Wave Cable also puts our services not just on cable TV, but also on their own YouTube channel. And they told me the first week it was on, I believe it was about 250 views there. Do you realize that that means on a weekly basis, we may be reaching 1,000 to 1,500 people with our services? Let me be clear about something in talking about that. Nothing has ever been further down my ministry wish list than having a lot of people watching me online or on TV. I don't believe the church can truly be the church if all we're doing is sitting on our couches and watching. However, I am recognizing that many of those who are watching are people who have not darkened the door of a church, maybe ever or not in a long time. There are people who have never seriously considered the claims of Jesus. And I don't want us to miss that opportunity. And I use the word us intentionally because this is an opportunity for all of us. A woman told me that she recently invited a neighbor to tune in and watch our service. And she thought nothing more of it. She really didn't think that the neighbor would. But a few days later, the neighbor told her that she had tuned in and that she had really enjoyed it. And it opened up a conversation for them to talk about faith. Do you see how we together can take advantage of an opportunity God has given to us to share the good news, to share our lives with others? Imagine if you and a small group of friends who had gathered for church invited 1 or 2 neighbors to join you when the time comes that we can do that. I think there are folks who would accept that invitation that might not show up here on a Sunday morning. What might God do? Do you remember the children of Israel when they were out in the desert and the going got hard and they didn't like it? And we find the story that at one point the people became consumed with thinking about what they had left behind. They just wanted to go back to Egypt because that's what they knew, and that seemed like a better life than what they were living with right now. God was not pleased. He was moving them to a new place, and it was not time for looking back. I want to challenge us not to waste a moment pining for what was. Pour your prayers out to God that He will help us to seize hold of what He is doing now. I think what lies ahead may be the most exciting chapter yet in the history of Dungeness Community Church. One more story came to my mind from the journey of Israel through the wilderness. It happened in the time of Joshua. It was the day that the nation officially prepared to enter into the promised land. And there was an obstacle in front of them. It was the Jordan River. And when Moses, years before, had come to the Red Sea, God had told him to raise his staff and the waters would part. And that was how Israel moved through. When Joshua came to another sea, another river that had to be crossed, the process was different. The Lord told him that the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant on their shoulders, that they were to go ahead and that the waters would not part until they actually stepped into the water. God's power was 100% present. Parting those waters was God's work. It was His miracle. And yet God asked them to take a scary step into the unknown to see that miracle unfold. I think God has brought us to the edge of a new land. There are obstacles and there are lots of unknowns in front of us. But I think that He is calling us to step in and let Him open the way. Are you ready to go? Let's pray. Father, we confess to You our bewilderment at the situation we find ourselves in. And we confess that our best guesses of the future are only guesses. But we know that You are the God who is sovereign, who sees the beginning and the end all at once. You have known this day would come before it ever came. And we know that You have a plan. Father, I pray for people who are watching right now that this has been perhaps an especially difficult trial for them. They are experiencing financial loss. Their hearts are troubled. They have health concerns. There are family tensions. Father, we would stop first and ask for Your healing, Your strength, Your provision for each one that is hurting in our congregation. We also would look ahead, Lord, and we want to be ready. We don't want to miss an opportunity You've put in front of us. We don't want to miss Your call. We're still sorting out what that means, Lord, and I ask that You would give us clarity, that You would go before us as we put our toes in the water. Would You please open a way for us? And I pray as we come out on the other side, we would look back with just wonder and praise for what You have done, because You are a good God, even in the midst of a crazy world. We pray these things in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm sure you have a lot to think about. You probably have a lot of questions. Don't worry, we have lots of questions too, and we have more questions than we have answers. But together we're going to figure this out. I want to remind you again, if you haven't done it already, go find that survey and answer it right now. It's just 10 questions. Send it in. If you can't find it, contact the church office and we'll be sure to get it to you. And again, thank you for taking the time this evening to listen. I look forward to the day that we can fill this place up again. And until then, I know that God has you in His grip. Good night.